And so we're going to talk about the 2000-2001 season, and then I've got to talk about a contract that got signed today that. But I'm going to do this first. That way I get this board out of the way. And then I still have the Nashville one to do, and then I've got the Flames, and then. Yeah, all right. 2000-2001. Patrick Roy wins his third Conn Smythe Trophy. So when people talk about, I don't know why Shannon thinks Roy is the best, it's because when he won the Stanley Cup, they went, and you're the MVP. 3 times. And he was the most valuable player. 137 wins in the playoffs by that point, which is still number one. And I don't think anybody ever gets near it. I would be very surprised if any goaltender ever got to 137 wins again. Your top 10 in the NHL, according to the Hockey News that year: Jaromir Jagr, Joe Sakic, Mario Lemieux, still at 3, despite back problems and missing about half the season. Peter Forsberg, Nick Lidstrom, Chris Pronger, Mike Modano, Paul Kariya, Dominic Hasek back at the top 10, and Pavel Bure at number 10. Though the team around him is crumbling, he's doing really, really well. The Anaheim Ducks, 25 wins, 17 points they lose in the standings, and just a general drop overall. Their scoring is down, and even Solani and Kariya aren't immune from this. So we see ourselves in a situation where the Ducks are kind of less relevant that season, and you wouldn't know from looking at them that they're going to win the Stanley Cup anytime soon. Boston, Pat Burns is fired 8 games into the season. Keenan's brought in. Keenan finishes out the year, but then they decide not to renew his contract, which leaves a lot of Bruins fans going, why did we bring in Keenan? They missed the playoffs by 1 point. 1 measly point. There's hope for the future. Joe Thornton's coming along, but in general, the team's still kind of spinning its wheels. And watching Keenan get on his out of Vancouver, I was like, oh, so glad he's out of Vancouver. And then Boston hires him, like, are you serious? Why? So I was half expecting when Keenan was let go by Boston to see him end up in Dallas, just to complete the unholy trinity. Buffalo. Pekka and Hasek are traded after a 98-point season. And all of the articles of the time say, don't panic. They got Marty Biron. They'll be fine. But Hasek is a huge driver for that team. Absolutely huge. You can't expect Marty Biron to step into those shoes. And Pekka didn't actually play that year. He held out for more money. So Mike Pekka, not a popular guy in Buffalo. He gets traded to, of all places, the Islanders, who pony up some money. And so suddenly the Islanders are willing to spend some money. Who knew? And the Sabres still get 98 points without Mike Pekka in the lineup. So good season for Buffalo, but some signs are there that maybe their time in the playoffs isn't going to be so easy now without Hasek. Carolina, they lost the first 3 against New Jersey, and then they forced a Game 6. So they won Games 4 and 5 to get their fans energized, but they lose it in 6. Irbe won 37 games, a career high for him. And Jeff O'Neill, you may know him as a Toronto fan from TSN programming, and he had 41 goals that year. So Jeff O'Neill, 40-goal scorer. On the Columbus side of things, 71 points in their first year, and Ron Tugnut sets an expansion year record with 22 wins. So Ron Tugnut, one of my personal heroes, 22 wins. That's a pretty good total for him. But Denis flops. Mark Denis was supposed to be the starter, and Tugnut was supposed to be the backup. That was the plan. Denis, when he came over from Colorado, was seen as the linchpin, as the future in the net, and Tugnut outplayed him. In Dallas, Brett Hull, he's gone after that season. And Turgeon and Lume are among the big money additions. The thing is, Dallas puts all these money guys together and buys all these players. It doesn't really mesh. When Brett Hull leaves, there goes their Stanley Cup dreams as well. The Dallas Stars kind of descend from there. 111 points for the Detroit Red Wings, but they're eliminated in round 1 by the LA Kings, and I remember that series very well. It was a shocker. But what does Detroit do? They go, well, Chris Osgood had a down season for us, so we're going to go with Manny Legacy and Dominic Hasek. Oh, Osgood, you're still here? This is going to be awkward. Osgood won't be there much longer. So Hasek comes in, and Brett Hull would come in as well. He was a free agent pretty far into the summer, but he would end up going to Detroit, and he'd make a big difference as well. Those 111 points, yeah, that's not what Detroit's about right now. It's about trying to win Stanley Cups. The Oilers, 93 points. They end up finishing 6th in the West. This is despite them being a cheaper team. They're fast and they're talented. But then to try to save money, they trade Doug Weight in the offseason. And they trade him for not enough. It's nowhere near enough that they get back for Doug Weight. And this is going to be a problem for the Oilers. Good young teams, fast, talented, but they can't afford them when their contracts are up and they have to trade them off. And they usually get an underwhelming return in those deals. Florida, 32-point drop for Florida. Just down, done, finished. And yet Luongo has a .920 save percentage that year. So without Roberto Luongo, it would have been even worse than the 32-point drop they had. So here's where the storyline starts of Lou being a great goaltender on a bad team. Pavel Bure scored 59 goals that year, but the next highest goal scorer was Viktor Kozlov with 14. So it's Bure, and nobody else. Which might very well be why that season you could forgive him for not ever having met his goaltender during the season. Bure, as great as he is, he's not able to make this team any better, and we're about to get into some uncomfortable conversations with Bure in regards to knees and his knee problems. But moving on from them to LA. The LA Kings force a Game 7 versus the Colorado Avalanche in Round 2 after knocking out the Detroit Red Wings. These guys look great. And Felix Potvin's a big part of it. Potvin was playing terribly for the Vancouver Canucks, and the Canucks desperately needed to change out their goaltending just like they had the year before. So Potvin's out, goes to LA and plays great. They got him for virtually nothing. And it made the Canucks look really bad when Potvin was really solid in those playoffs. The thing with Potvin was he could start really fast with a team, and then the holes in his game would show up again, which is kind of how things ended up against the Avs. They would end up, being able to show that he was weaker. I want to say it was on the glove side that almost every goal was going in. I'm trying to remember if it was glove or blocker. I think it was glove side. And when it was high glove side, it just went in every time. Minnesota has 68 points in their first season, so they're 3 points short of Columbus's total. Manny Fernandez, .920 save percentage, 2.05 goals per game by this team. So they had to have goaltending. Without their goaltending, this team would have struggled to get 50 points. So no 20 goal scorers on this team. And as for most expansion teams of this time, there just isn't a premier big name guy. Gabrick's on his way up. Gabrick's going to be that guy. But that first year, they don't really have one. Montreal, a dramatic change for Jeff Hackett's fortunes. He just falls apart. Has an absolutely miserable season, and Jose Theodore steps in and says, I'll take the reins. I'll be the goaltender. But still no playoffs, and they end up finishing 24th overall. So it's a year for Montreal that you can see the promise ahead, but it's tough to watch Hackett that year. And if Hackett had played well, they could very well have been a playoff team. Now, on the Nashville side of things, their wins totals go up. 34 wins, they end up with 80 points. And Dunham ends up with a save percentage of .923 that year. So we think a lot about Rinne. You might think about Vaucoon when it comes to Nashville. But Dunham had a pretty good run there too. And Scotty Walker is their only 20 goal scorer. And at this point, Canuck fans are beside themselves watching Scotty Walker, because he has become a 20-goal scorer who can fight, who can hit, and that's what Vancouver needed, and they gave him up in the expansion draft. We won't get into who they protected, but a lot of guys they protected would not have played as well as Scotty Walker did. So Walker, who had been a defenseman at points in his career as well, ends up being a pretty solid top six forward for Nashville, putting in goals and making Canuck fans say, who is this guy? We never saw him in Vancouver. New Jersey, they narrowly lose the finals versus the Avs. So they're close. They're almost back-to-back champs. The interesting thing is Marty Brodeur does not have a very good playoffs. He ends up with an .897 save percentage in the playoffs. So in the matchup between Brodeur and Roy wins that battle. And Brodeur, of course, will have his comebacks and he'll have his really strong years. But it says something for how well the Devils have become a better team offensively when you see that Brodeur gets that close to a Stanley Cup with a save percentage below 900. It says a lot about New Jersey and them minimizing chances against Brodeur and also being able to put goals in the other end. The Rangers are 21st overall, and if you're an Islanders fan going, why don't you talk about, guys, don't worry about me not talking about the Islanders. It's for the best. The New York Rangers 21st overall. Sather is bidding on everybody. This is the thing. They miss out on Lindros. They miss out on Yager, but he wants everybody. Just, all right, I got money now. I got New York money. Everybody come on in. All right, come on in. I was running the Oilers. We had no money. Now I got all the money. Everybody come in. And it's having mixed results. They're 21st overall. They're still not a playoff team, but you cannot rebuild if you're the New York Rangers under a non-salary cap system. I would argue if we didn't have a salary cap now, the Rangers would still fight rebuilds all the way and say, no, we can just buy all the free agents during the summer and we'll be great. And you'd see insane amounts of money being offered out by the New York Rangers. Ottawa, 109 points. Great year. Swept in the first round by the Leafs. I remember that one. That was the one that just, I was floored at how poorly Ottawa played and how psychologically Toronto got in their heads. They just mentally believed they couldn't beat Toronto, and there was no beating Toronto if you're Ottawa. It was the most bizarre example I can think of where a team psychs itself out against an opponent. Yashin had 1 assist in 4 games, and this was the 3rd straight first-round exit. So Yashin starts taking some heat at this point, like, hey, you're supposed to be the big star of this team. Where were you on that one? And so the Leafs making them look bad. The Flyers, 100 points for them. They're out in round 1, however, against Buffalo. So being out in round 1 means that you've got to find somebody to point fingers at. The fact that Lindros didn't play, now he's already had some concussion issues, but this is contract dispute territory as well. And so Bobby Clark and Eric Lindros are headed towards an ugly divorce here. Jeremy Roenick gets signed to a 5-year, $37.5 million contract. Now, you look at that by today's standards, that's $7.5 million a year for Roenick. But think about how long ago this is. How much money would Philly be throwing at players right now? 15 million? 16 million? It was crazy money for Roenick, and this is why after the lockout, when they talk about how, hey, JR, you veterans voted on this collective bargaining agreement that kind of screws over the kids. How do you feel about that? His answer was, I'm paraphrasing, I made my money. And right here, this is where I made my money came from. Arizona couldn't get it done. Philly did. Speaking of Arizona, they can't get it done. They have 90 points, but they have to slash payroll. They don't have money. So there's a major roster turnover, and it starts to eat away at their chances of actually having any playoff success. Pittsburgh, Final Four run with Hedberg. This was when the Moose became the big guy, being called up towards the end of the year from the Manitoba Moose. Johan Hedberg wore his Manitoba Moose mask, and it became a big deal. That became his nickname with the Penguins, and so from then on, he would wear masks that had a moose head on them in reference to that. Hedberg was great those playoffs. It's also Jágr's last year before the trade to the Capitals. So it's Jágr's final season with Pittsburgh. They have Hedberg for this great playoff run, and it means that the bar's been raised for Hedberg, much like it was with Sean Burke a decade and a half before, to a level that he's not going to be able to reach. But I like Hedberg, good goaltender. St. Louis, 103 points, and they get to the Final Four. They get to the conference final for only the second time in 30 years. Pretty good year. However, Roman Turek, gone. Pierre Turgeon, gone. And they add Doug Weight and Mike Keane. So, I can't say that losing Pierre Turgeon means they don't win a Stanley Cup. I can't say that losing Roman Turek means they don't win a Stanley Cup. But there's some turnover in St. Louis. They're able to pay a guy like Doug Weight. But again, it's just a lot of star power with St. Louis and not a lot of success. San Jose. This is the first time that San Jose has a plus 500 record. And now they lose in the first round. They lose in the first round to the aforementioned St. Louis Blues. So it's like, yay, we had a good regular season, and now we're out in the postseason early. So it's kind of a reversal. Tampa, 59 points. Not a good season, but they had Andrechuk, Habby Bulin, Vaclav Prospel, and a bunch of other players. And Richards has 62 points as a rookie. So the signs are there. Habby Bulin arrives in Tampa after not being able to come to contract terms with Arizona. Only plays 2 games at the end of the year for Tampa, but he's going to be a big part of the 2004 Stanley Cup win. So Tampa, it's a miserable season standings-wise, but you get the feeling they're going to be much better the year after. Toronto drops 10 points, and they lose in the second round against New Jersey in 7, so they're down to 90 points. They add McGillney, Reichel, Renberg, and others. They lose Sergei Berezin and Steve Thomas are the notables there. This is when Toronto, all right, got to loosen up the purse strings, and we're going to buy as many players as we can, and that's kind of what's going on here, and it's going to have mixed results. But Toronto, still contender, and still, as was being said at the time, they fashioned themselves as a contender for the Stanley Cup. So they're going to bring in as much big-name talent as they can to try to get to that goal. Vancouver, they are swept by the Avalanche in round 1, but it's the first time they've been back in the playoffs in a while. And 41 goals from Marcus Naslund as he starts to emerge as a star. And Potvin's out and Kluche's in, which was weird. I remember when Kluche came in from Tampa and his numbers were miserable. And right away, it felt like Burke was saying, this is going to be our starter. And there was kind of a collective, what? From Vancouver media and fans. He would have some pretty good seasons. What Kluche's remembered for is the gaffes in the playoffs. As we go forward through this series, I will try to show how his stats were pretty good in the regular season, and I understood why the Canucks gave him as much leeway and as much of a leash as they could for those playoff mistakes. But yeah, that's kind of where the Canucks are at. Capitals, so ending it here, they have 96 points, but they lose in the first round to the Penguins because Washington-Pittsburgh is a bad matchup for the Capitals. And then the Caps steal Jágr from the Pens. It's not a trade where they get Jágr. It's theft. The thing is, Jágr and the Capitals don't mix very well. We'll find that out as we go further through this. But it is kind of strange how Jágr's time in Washington is remembered completely differently than his time in Pittsburgh. Almost as dramatically different as Messier's career between the Rangers and the Canucks is remembered completely differently, but for different reasons. But yeah, so there you go. You guys are all caught up on the 2000-2001 season. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. Just happened upon this video, and hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.